Sure.
Well, I think we'll get started, everybody. So welcome and thank you for coming to our first for a long time, Spring Quenda Count info session. So I'm Tracy Bell. I'm the one of the environmental officers for the Shire of Mundaring, and I run the Land for Wildlife program, which is also a new program. And the Spring Quenda Count is one of the little projects we're doing ongoing from now going forward as long as we can to count quenda. But we'll talk about that in a minute. So I'd like to introduce you to Dr Amanda Kristancic, and she's our wonderful wildlife ecologist, and she was the one that contacted me about, hey, this would be a great thing for the Shire to get involved with. So thanks to Amanda. So before we kick off, come on in, come and grab a chair. I just wanted to tell you a little bit about the Land for Wildlife program. So hopefully you grabbed a brochure from down the back. So this tells you all about it. So it's really aimed at improving biodiversities on small properties. So anybody with a property over a hectare can join the program, and you get access to free events. You get access to wildlife camera that you can loan to see who's visiting your property. And also we have lots of other activities, citizen science like this project. So have a read of that, and if you're eligible to join, you're in the Shire of Mundaring and you have one of the larger properties, we'd love you to join, because we all need to work together to make sure we retain our wildlife habitat into the future. We also have a 6 Seasons newsletter. So this is all about our environmental initiatives from the Shire, including the Land for Wildlife program. And I'll just draw your attention to this page where we have a list of events coming up throughout the year until Christmas. So most of them are focused around wildlife. So all of you are welcome to come, and all our events are free. So we want everybody to come along. And just ensure you grab one of our Spring Quenda Count templates to fill in. And they've also got the instructions. So Amanda will be talking about that as we go. So, and just some housekeeping. So the toilets are down the back. And if there's a fire, we will escape to this area out to the grass. I don't think there'll be a fire today. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Amanda.
Thank you.
And continue on. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Tracy. Okay. Now, before I start, can everyone hear me if I speak like this? No? I will hold this. I can hold this microphone. Is that better? Okay, hang on. I can't find somewhere to attach it where it can hear me, so. Okay, thanks everyone for coming to join us today to learn about quendas and about how you can help monitor quendas by taking part in the Spring Quenda Count. My name's Amanda. I'm a local wildlife ecologist. So I currently work as a consultant in wildlife ecology, and I used to work at Murdoch researching quenda in urban areas. I have a real soft spot for quenda. I live in Swanview and we see them regularly in our yard, and I just love seeing them. So for the last 4 years, I've been helping to coordinate the Spring Quenda Count in collaboration with WWF Australia and the DBCA, the Department of Biodiversity, Conservation and Attractions. Whoops, sorry guys. Okay, before I start, I would like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which we meet today, the Noongar Wadjuk people, and pay my respects to their elders, past, present and emerging. I thought I'd just give you a summary of what I'll cover today. So first we'll talk about what is a quenda, some information about quenda, and how you might spot quenda and how you might know if you have them on your property. We'll talk a bit about some of the reasons why quendas are so special and so important, and then I'll go into details about the Spring Quenda Count. This has actually been running, the program in general has been running for more than 10 years. So I'll tell you a bit about the history of how it started and how it's developed since then. I'll give you some information about how your data that you contribute in the Spring Quenda Count actually helps scientists to monitor quenda populations. And then I will go through in detail how to participate, what sort of information we need and how to fill out the data sheet. So we'll have some time at the end for questions, but I'm also happy for you to raise your hand at any point if you have a question, and we can deal with it as we go.
Why don't you call them bandicoots?
Okay, I'll probably cover this in this slide, I reckon. So what is a quenda? Well, a quenda is a type of bandicoot. So we can call them bandicoots, but there are lots of different bandicoots. And so the one that we get here in WA, in Perth, well, in the southwest of WA, is actually a unique species. It was formerly known as a subspecies of southern brown bandicoot, and that was its Latin name, Isoodon obesulus fusciventa, showing that it's a subspecies. So that was the subspecies here, and then we've got these 3 other subspecies across Australia. Some genetic work actually suggested that the animals we have here are distinct genetically. They're a separate species. So now we call them Isoodon fusciventa, and their common name is quenda, to show that they are a unique species. Does that answer your question? Okay, so quenda are marsupials. These animals have a pouch. You can see in this picture, their pouch actually faces backwards. I'll show you. You can see a little baby sticking out. Unlike a kangaroo whose pouch faces upwards so the baby doesn't fall out, quenda faces backwards, probably because they dig and they don't want to get dirt into their pouch. So quenda breed all year round, and they have about 3 to 4 litters per year. This is a picture of what the babies look like when they're just born. So they come out as little pink jelly beans, crawl up into the pouch, and attach themselves to a teat. They can have up to 4 joeys at a time in there. They have one of the shortest gestations of any animal. So that's the time that it's actually in the uterus inside the mother, 12 days, and then it's born as this tiny little undeveloped creature that has to continue its development in the pouch. So they spend about 2 months in the pouch, and in that time they get quite big. I don't know if anyone's seen quenda with like a massive big belly. You think, how on earth are they keeping them in there? Yeah, I've actually got, if this works, hopefully it works. In case you haven't seen the babies moving, you can see them wiggling around. Yes, so it can look quite dramatic at times.
We have, in our street, there are so many quendas, and I have them in the backyard.
Yeah.
But they get killed so frequently because cars just run over them.
Yes.
Cars come up our street very fast.
Yeah. It's one of the threats they face in urban areas
It's
is
like you don't
cars.
see the big ones after a while, and just see a couple of little ones.
Yeah.
And then, they sort of bleed for a while, and then they start to come back.
Yeah.
Terrible. They don't have very long lives.
Yeah, no, that is a common thing to see quendas being hit by cars. Some people, we try to put out signs, to make people aware that there's quendas there and maybe slow down, but it's very hard to influence people's behaviours, especially if they're not aware that there's animals around.
And also, we found a few dead ones, and I think they've been eating the rat pellets.
Yes, another big problem.
I mean, people don't seem to realise that they're protected.
Yeah.
I think sometimes people don't recognise the difference between the rats and the quendas, because if they haven't seen a quenda, a rat does look like it from first impression.
Yeah, absolutely. So I've got a slide about that actually, good timing. People who are unfamiliar with them do often think they're rats when they first see them. Adult quenda are quite a lot bigger than rats, but the juveniles are about the same size. If you only get a glance, it looks like a rat. And if you don't know that quendas exist, then you'll think it's a rat. The key features to tell them apart from looking at them is their nose and their tail. So I used to think that rats had a pointy nose, but that's a rat, right? Once you look at a quenda, you go, oh, that's actually quite a rounded nose, and that's a pointy nose. So a very, very pointy nose, quenda. The other thing is the tail. So quendas have quite a short tail. It's usually it's about half the length of their body. Anything that's got a tail that's as long as its body, or sometimes even longer, that's typical of a rat. So if you can keep those two features in mind when you're telling people about how to tell them apart, that would be good. Okay, so some information about what quendas eat. They're opportunistic omnivores, which means they will pretty much eat anything. I'm sure some of you probably know they get into chook yards, compost heaps, they eat dog food, cat food, anything pretty much. This is their natural food, things like these. This is a native truffle, so it's similar to the truffles that we eat. It's a fruiting body of a fungus, but we have a whole heap in Australia that are native to Australia, and we don't really eat them, but quendas do. So they dig them up and eat them. They also eat grubs, including lawn beetle grubs. So if you're upset about holes in your lawn, just remember they're eating grubs. They also eat the roots and tubers of some plants. But as I mentioned, they eat anything. So they will get into people's gardens. Sometimes people leave food specifically for them. Other times it's compost or animal, pet food. And so in this picture, you can see there's some bread and some seeds or oats. This is a picture from a project we did down in Mandurah where we were looking at urban quenda. And so, yes, both of these animals have come in for this food. Luckily for this quenda, the cat seems to not really be interested in the quenda. But you can see, aside from health effects of eating the wrong food, quenda coming into gardens for food can actually also put them at risk of things like this. Yep.
If you were to feed them, what would you feed them with?
That's a good question. We recommend that you don't feed them. There is actually a great website called Healthy Wildlife, Healthy Lives, which has a lot of information about feeding wildlife of all types. They can find the food they need in bushland and in gardens. If you want to support them in your garden, rather than feeding them unnatural foods, you can plant native vegetation. They can dig up their own food from underneath. Mulched garden beds make a really nice spot for fungi to grow and for grubs to live in. And some people do provide them water, which can help support them in those places as long as it's a shallow dish that they can't drown in. That's a great way to support them because, as we know, in the drying climate, we do need to sometimes give our wildlife water.
Lifespan.
Ooh, that's a good one. I didn't include that. I think I've seen written like about 3 years in the wild, but it depends on a lot of things. Yeah. Okay, we'll move on to how you might spot quendas. Some people probably have no trouble and they just walk up while you're having a cup of tea, right? Yes. Depending on where you are, sometimes they're more or less friendly. They like to live around areas of dense vegetation, often also near waterways or little swamps or things. And so this is so that they can hide from predators in the dense vegetation. Now, importantly for quendas, that dense vegetation, it could be something more native, like this with your grass trees and native shrubs. But what they really care about, it seems, is the structure of the vegetation. So they like dense vegetation they can hide in. They don't care if it's an ornamental species, an invasive species, or a native species. So they like gardens as well. They're often described as nocturnal, which again, I have not seen to be the case. On the way here this morning, one was on the road in front of me at 8:20. So also, they are most active at night when we put out cameras, but they're also active at all times of the day. And I think it's probably also that's more the case in urban areas, possibly, where, in bushland, out in nature, maybe they are more strictly nocturnal, but we see them a lot. These photos are actually from my backyard where I put out one of these remote sensor cameras a few years ago. So you can see I captured pictures of quendas at night, but also at various times of the day. The best time to see them if you're trying to look for them would be dawn and dusk, because they are most active at those times, aside from in the middle of the night when you will be in bed. Okay, so you might not see actual quendas running around, but there's other ways to tell whether they're visiting your property. And that is because when they're digging for all those foods I mentioned, they leave distinctive conical holes. So by conical, I'm referring to this pointed shape here at the front of the dig. And I call this the front because the animal is facing that way. And this is all of the dirt that it's pulled up out of the hole, called the spoil heap. And I love this photo because you can actually see little impressions where the quenda's back feet was sitting and where its tail was sitting. And you can just imagine it halfway, head halfway down the hole, having a great time. So things like rabbits also dig holes, but they don't have the same shape. So here's a rabbit dig that I found recently. So this is the spoil heap at the back, so the animal's facing this way. You can see the front of the dig it's a bit messy, it's rounded off, and so it doesn't have that nice pointy shape. And that's how you can tell, usually. I don't know if this will work. This is a video, again from my backyard. I might have to play it a few times. Okay. There's a quenda here. I'm not sure if you can see it. The grass was very uncooperative and it's having a dig. I just thought I'd show half of its body's down the hole, digging away. And the next slides, I tried to get a little, just another, I can't remember the word, 5 photos in a row on my wildlife camera, and you can see him disappear down into the hole while he's having a dig. And this is what your garden might look like after quendas have been having a dig. Lots of little holes all around the place.
Some not so little.
Yes, true. Okay, so all this digging actually means quendas are considered ecosystem engineers. So ecosystem engineers are species that modulate the availability of resources for other species. They modify, maintain and create habitats. And this is really important for keeping ecosystems functioning properly. There are some other digging mammals that are also ecosystem engineers, like the bilby and the woylie. When it comes to quendas, it's been estimated that a single quenda, on average, can dig 45 pits per day. I expect sometimes it's a lot more than that, but this was a study where they tried to look at the average. And that equated to 11 kilograms of soil in one day. Over a year, that equals almost 4 tonnes of soil. So there's a lot of soil being moved by just one animal. So all that digging and all that movement of soil, it has benefits for the ecosystem. I like to call quenda nature's gardeners, because some of these services that they provide to the ecosystem, it's kind of like what you do when you're gardening. So the physical process of actually digging that hole breaks the surface of the dirt. And in Australia, often that surface is very water repellent. The water will just run away. So by breaking that surface, they can help water to infiltrate further into the soil. The hole itself actually captures organic matter like leaf litter and things and helps it break down faster. So it's kind of like fertilising your soil, adding that organic matter back in. The spoil heap that they dig out, they dig it onto leaf litter often. And by covering up the leaf litter with soil, that helps it to break down faster. That helps the soil health, but it also has been shown to reduce the fuel load for bushfires because that leaf litter is getting broken down. And there are some studies where they had digging mammals inside and outside a fence. It's an exclusion fence to keep them safe from predators. And a bushfire happened to go through. And they had a look at the behaviour of the bushfire inside and outside the fence. And actually it burnt out faster inside the fence and it was a lot less destructive. It didn't get as hot compared to outside the fence. And they attribute that to the actions of these digging mammals.
Do we make a note if we see one with a hat on?
Please do. Yes. The little holes that they dig actually as well can capture seeds of plants and actually give them a nice little microclimate to grow in safely. So they can that can help with seedling recruitment and just more trees in the bush. Okay, so all of this is to say, not only do we love quenda and love seeing them around, they're actually really important for our urban bushland. And if you are lucky enough to have them on your property, then they're giving you those gardening services as well. If we lose them in urban areas, that is likely to have flow-on effects for the health of those urban ecosystems. So let's talk a bit more about quenda in urban areas. We're actually very lucky in Perth that we still see quendas in urban areas. A lot of species over east don't seem to cope so well with modified environments. So quenda here seem to have adapted fairly well. We see them regularly in urban bushland, but also in gardens. The Perth Hills actually are a stronghold for the species, probably because there's still a lot of remnant vegetation left around and lots of properties are larger. So they're not currently threatened. By that I mean they're not listed under legislation as a threatened species or endangered or vulnerable, but they are listed by the DBCA as a priority 4 species, which means they require ongoing monitoring. And this is because they're susceptible to several threats associated with urbanisation and continued land clearing. These threats, as we have talked about, include vehicle strike, so getting hit by cars, being attacked or killed by introduced predators. That's pet dogs, pet cats, feral cats, and foxes. They also sadly sometimes drown in backyard swimming pools and ponds, and they can fall victim to baits such as rat bait, sometimes accidentally and sometimes I fear on purpose, and snail baits.
So they can't swim?
One of my kids asked me this recently. I don't know, I think that they can swim a little bit, but they can't get out of a pool if they fall in. Something that people have done successfully is you can buy or make ramps, wildlife ramps, to help frogs and things get out. I don't know how effective they are for quendas. We haven't really studied it, but it can't hurt to have something like that in there that if they can grab onto it, they can scrabble themselves out. So yes, they're in need of monitoring, and that is where the Spring Quenda Count comes in. So it all started in 2012 with something called the Community Quenda Survey. This was a collaboration between WWF Australia and the Department of Parks and Wildlife, which is now DBCA. And so they did a big media campaign and they just asked people, members of the public, to report sightings of quendas. And this is an extract from that report, showing the locations where quendas were sighted. So 946 people reported quenda at just over 1,000 sites across Perth. Quenda sightings were reported mostly in suburbs that have a large amount of remnant vegetation remaining. And the result of this was that 60% of all those sightings were made in only 3 local government areas. So you can see the clusters here and here. So that's the Shire of Mundaring, City of Kalamunda and the City of Armidale. So that is where most of those sightings came from. One of the recommendations from that project in 2012 was to establish an ongoing citizen science project, and that is how the Quenda Count was born. And so it started the following year in 2013 and was coordinated by WWF Australia. It was coordinated by them from 2013 to 2024. And from this year onwards, the WA Gould League will be running the project across the Perth area. And the Shire of Mundaring is very enthusiastic about supporting the project in this area, which is why we've got this talk and such a lot of support from Tracy. Thank you. Okay, so before I go into detail about how to take part, I'll give you some information about how the data are used. So the data are used to track broad trends in quenda abundance across Perth. This map shows where quenda have been sighted from 2013 to 2024. So some people take part only 1 year, and other people, one of these dots might represent someone who's taken part every single year since then. So we've got some analysis of the data from 2013 to 2023, and this shows the average number of quenda per daily survey across the entire Perth area, so looking at a very broad population trend. And there's a bit of variation over time, with a bit of a jump here, but overall there's no sign of a declining trend, which is a good sign, but we do want to keep an eye on them. And also you may notice these numbers here, n equals 155. That means 155 people participated that year. And if you have a look, it just is slowly declining over time. Last year we had only 24 people. So we really want to ramp up the numbers so that we can make sure that we have a good picture of what's happening with quenda numbers across Perth. Okay, so now we'll get into details about how to take part. My friend and PhD student that I was supervising took this photo when she was doing her research. I don't know if you can see this little bit at the back here. She had a GPS tracker attached to it, and the hair falls out when the tracker falls off. It doesn't hurt them, but she got some really interesting data about how they move through urban ecosystems, which was great. Okay, so to take part in the Quenda Count, I should ask, has anyone taken part before? Or is this new to everyone? You have? Okay, great. There have been a few small changes this year, so we've got instructions though, so we'll go through it. So to take part, you have to choose a site. Now we want you to choose somewhere where you've seen quendas before or where you've seen their digs. There's not really any point in counting where we've never seen quenda because they might not be there. If you have taken part before, we'd like you to use the same site, assuming you can still access that site. So this year, we'd like you to choose 1 week in October when you can do at least one survey. That can be whatever week works for you, and it doesn't have to be Sunday to Sunday, just a 7-day period in October. During each survey, we just want you to keep an eye out for quenda and count how many you see and how long you've spent looking. So I'll go into a bit more detail about those aspects now. So this is a screenshot of the data sheet that you've got. We ask for some basic information like your name, contact, just so that we can keep in touch with you. Your survey site address allows us to look at more detailed population trends within certain areas if we know where your site is.
Do you actually have to see them or just notice activity?
If you have diggings in your property, is that what you mean? You can definitely take part. If you don't see them, that's fine. I'll go into detail about that soon. Yep. So we ask for the size of your survey site. Now you don't need to worry too much about being exact here. It's just a rough size so that we can take that into account when we're looking at data. Whether someone's looking in a tiny courtyard or a large backyard helps us to take that into account. We suggest that the ideal survey area is 50 metres by 50 metres. If your yard is smaller than this, then just let us know around how big that is. I live on quite a large block, and so when I do the Quenda Count, I just choose one section of it, and it's roughly 50 metres by 50 metres. This makes it easier for me as well to do the count because I only have to focus on one patch instead of trying to move around and see them in lots of areas. Okay, and this last section, the description of survey site, this just gives us a bit of information we can use to look at whether quenda are doing different things in different types of properties. I don't like this. Okay, this is the next part of the survey sheet. I've put some example data in there. So it provides space for up to 3 surveys in your, so survey 1, 2, 3, in your chosen week in October. We do first. So we say even a single survey, so just doing one row here, that's useful and we'd like you to do that. If you're able to do 2 or 3, that's even better. If you do multiple surveys, we just ask that you leave 1 or 2 days between each survey.
Does each survey have to be on the same 50 by 50?
Yes, yes. If you do happen to have 2 sites you'd like to look at, it's probably not worth doing if they're in the same property unless they're quite far apart. But if you, for example, have your house and then your friend's house who's in a different suburb, you can put in 2 data sheets for those separate sites. Does that make sense? But you'd need to fill out the site information for both. Okay, so firstly, no, stop it. Okay, firstly, we want the date. So I've put in imaginary dates in October. What is actually really useful and what I'd like you to do is choose your dates before you do the surveys. So have a look at the calendar and say, okay, I'm home this week. I can do surveys on the 11th, 13th and 16th of October. I will plan to do my surveys on those days rather than being tempted to wait until you see a quenda before you start a survey, because that can bias your data towards, you'll only give us records of when you see quenda, and we actually really need to know when you don't see quenda. So I'll talk more about that in a minute. Basically, if you plan your dates in advance, it gives us a more random snapshot of what's going on, which is really helpful. So the next thing that we want you to include is the amount of time you spent looking. And when I say looking for quenda, this can be while you're sitting in your yard, looking in your survey area, having a cup of tea, doing some gardening. You don't have to be actively, walking around looking. It can be a bit more relaxed. If you do happen to do your survey, if you happen to do no, I won't talk about that. I might talk about it at the end, sorry. Yes, so we just need to know how long you spent looking. This is really, really important. Even if you see quenda all day, every day, we need, for you to take part in this project, we need you to make an effort to say, I'm now looking for quenda for half an hour and I'm going to count how many individual quenda I see. And that's the sort of data we need to be able to analyse it. So if you can imagine we've got 2 properties that both have the same number of quenda. Of course, we won't know how many quenda are there, but let's pretend they both have 6 quenda visiting regularly. If property number 1 searches for quenda for 5 minutes and property number 2 searches for quenda for an hour, you can see that property number 2, they're more likely to see more quenda simply because they were looking for longer. So that is why we need this information to be filled in. It allows us to correct or standardise your data so that we can compare one site to another site. Okay, the final column is how many quendas you saw. Now we say to only report the number of individual quendas. I heard some people talking about how do you tell them apart. Well, often you can't, which is tricky. So some people have quendas visit that have obvious distinct features like a missing tail or a chunk taken out of the ear. There are also different size quendas that you might recognise. So for an example, if you're doing the count and you see a large quenda bound past and then it goes out of sight, and then in your survey time you see another large quenda and you go, oh, I don't know if that was the same one. That's just one, just count it as one. However, if you see the large quenda go past and then a couple of minutes later a small quenda goes past, they're obviously different animals, so you can count that as 2. Or if you have any distinct animals that you know from their features, some people are very, very familiar with their regulars, and so it gives them a bit more confidence in being able to say how many.
Do you want their names as well?
Yes, please. Sounds good. You might also see groups, of course. If you see 3 quendas at one time and you can see all 3 at the same time, then that is a record of 3 for that survey. Okay, a very important thing when we're talking about number of quendas seen. You'll see on my last imaginary survey, I didn't see any quendas. This can be pretty disappointing for when you're taking part in a citizen science project, but this data is really, really, really important, because knowing when you don't see quenda, that's what we need to know to detect a decline. Can you imagine if you have taken part in this project for 10 years and then every year you see quenda and then 1 year you don't see quenda and so you don't submit your data? Then that means we don't have that data to say maybe they're declining in that area. So even though it might seem a bit disappointing and you might think it's pointless, actually that zero data is crucial, so important. So as long as you're on the lookout for quendas, if you don't see any, tell us how long you were looking and that you saw none. Thank you.
You don't have the time of day on that as well?
It's a good question. I have debated whether we include the time of day.
AM or PM?
If you want to, certainly, yeah. We've thought a bit about that and I think it would be helpful. So, sure. We might include it on future. I might need to talk to DBCA guy about that. Okay, now the last part of the data sheet, these are some additional questions. They're optional, really. You can, if you only submit that, the top section and the middle section, we can still use your data. But there's some interesting questions here that will help us to get a better idea of how quenda are going, what threats they're facing, and things like that. So the first one is, how often do you see quendas in your survey site? And this is like a general, in general, how often do you see them? Is it, a few times a year? Is it maybe once a month, once a week, or almost every single day? Just choose the one that's closest to what fits for you. The next question is about any change in frequency. So we get a lot of people contacting us through the Quenda Count and they'll say, oh, we seem to not get any this year, but normally there's heaps. So we want to capture that more formally from now on. So you can let us know whether you see them less often than you did last year, about the same or more often. And then this is about those cone-shaped diggings. So even if you don't see any quendas in your surveys, we do want to know whether you've seen activity and evidence of quendas. Then we ask a question about any dead quendas that you've seen. We like to keep track of what causes of mortality there are. So if you are able to provide a rough number, and just your best estimate is fine, of how many you've seen, hit by a car, attacked by a cat, any of these things, that can be helpful for us. There's a question here about extensive areas of bare skin, patchy or missing fur. And this question is included because quenda occasionally, a mange outbreak goes through the population, and the DBCA wanting to monitor that. It seems to be almost a natural part of the population, population dynamics, and it goes away without too much intervention, but they want to keep an eye on it. And so often quendas will have little patches of missing fur, right, from fighting. This is, to say yes to this, we really want to know if they look really unwell, like lots and lots of missing fur. Then we're interested in any features of your site that you think might encourage quendas to visit or might discourage quendas to visit. Again, we've added these questions in because I get a lot of anecdotal information through emails, people saying, a dog moved in next door and now I never see quendas anymore. Or, they've cleared the bit of bush down the road and now we don't see quendas as often. So we want to formally capture that information as well. And this last bit, if you want to tell us about any other animals that you see or any interesting quenda activity or behaviour you've noticed, feel free. You can also let us know what the weather was like during your surveys, especially if you think that influenced the results. If the weather was just horrendous, you can add that there.
Excuse me, in the last question when you said factors that discourage, should there also be one for encourage?
Yes, sorry, there is. I probably spoke too quickly.
Oh, yeah.
So yes, the first one is,
Sorry.
encourage and discourage.
That's right.
Yep. Okay, so to summarise, quenda are a unique species of bandicoot found only in the southwest of WA. They provide ecosystem services that help keep urban bushland healthy and will also keep your properties healthy. And we're really lucky to see them in our gardens. They're a priority 4 species, which means they're in need of ongoing monitoring. And the Spring Quenda Count helps scientists monitor quenda populations. Important things that we need to know is how many quendas you saw, how long you spent looking, and if you don't see any, we really, really want to know that. So please do include that information. Okay, thank you. Any more questions? Hibernate?
Yeah.
No.
Because we don't see them as much in winter
Okay.
as we do in.
Yeah. The reason that we do this count in spring is because it's a good time to see them. I expect it's a combination of they may be out more in the nice weather and we are also out more in the nice weather. You know, in winter we're kind of hiding away from the rain. I've seen them foraging in the rain. They don't seem too bothered, but they don't hibernate per se. Yes?
And also,
Do
Sorry.
they happily coexist with rabbits?
They definitely coexist with rabbits. Happily, I don't know. They would compete for the same sorts of resources, food and nesting sites. I reckon there's probably not. They're probably fairly happy. If there's too many rabbits, then they eat all the food and they degrade the vegetation, which in the long term would be bad. But I think on an individual, you know, quenda to rabbit kind of thing, they don't fight with them or anything.
So how, is it the females that attack the other females for them to lose their tails? Because I've only seemed to have one male out of all the females I see.
Okay.
And it's not him, is it? He's the one that...
Well, males do fight with other males.
Yeah.
In fact, quendas fight with other quendas. They don't really like each other, you know. They're quite solitary.
You know, bobtail, short tail, no tail.
Yeah, yeah.
You know.
Yeah, males can have quite spectacular fights with each other. I'm not sure whether males or females are more likely to fight,
Yeah.
but yeah.
It's the females that seem to lose their tails.
Yeah, okay.
Not the males.
Yeah. Interesting. Did you have, yeah.
if they only live for 3 or 4 years, how old are they when they start breeding?
Good question. They would be fairly young as soon as they're independent. So they are in the pouch for about 2 months and then I think about another month they stay with their mother. I'd say by 6 months they would be breeding, maybe earlier. Yeah.
Quite young.
Yes.
Just talking about rabbits, they don't get affected by the calesi or the exotosis?
No. As far as I know, no. Yeah.
Where do they sleep?
Where do they sleep?
Yeah, do they have like a burrow or...
They create nest sites, nests in dense vegetation. They like to make nests in grass trees. We've been taking some quenda from a relocation program to Whiteman Park. They have a fenced reserve there where we've been letting them go. And I could actually see, I haven't seen this before because I don't think I've seen grass trees where there are so many quendas. There are little fairy doors almost, you know, little openings in the grass tree where you can tell that a quenda's living inside that, well, you know, in the skirt of the grass tree. They make nests in leaf litter and in just dense vegetation. They're very hard to see. And then we've tried to get photos of them, but they don't look like anything. They look like a pile of leaves. When you open them up, you know, they still just look like a pile of leaves. So.
Without
Yep.
getting up close and personal with them, how do you tell the difference between males and females?
Well, if the female has, if you see one with a really big belly, that'd be a female with pouch young. If it's a female without pouch young and you can't get a look, you know, between the legs, then you can't really. Yeah.
Excuse me, I just want to...
Yeah. Yeah. When we, as part of my work, when we need to do that, we have to look and see if we can see the testes or the pouch. Yeah.
Can you make some sort of shelter for them if you haven't got much?
Yes, definitely. So there's information online for bandicoot bungalows, they call them. People make them out of pallets. There's a few different ways to do it. We actually did this at Murdoch as one of our research projects. We made them out of recycled plastic pallets, you know, so big pallets, yep. With, we've got to peg them into the ground to make sure that foxes can't lift them up. And we also added some stakes to make the entrances smaller, just to make sure that cats couldn't get in. And you want to make sure there's multiple entrances and exits. We covered them up with branches and dead leaves and things. And then because we were at Murdoch, they were worried about them looking terrible in the gardens, and also the bushfire risk of having a big pile of dead, you know, leaves. That's why we use plastic pallets, but you can use wooden pallets. And you don't need, we covered them with shade cloth to make them look a bit nicer, but you don't have to do that, just basically a big pile of sticks. Some people use pipes and things to give them places to run into. You need to be careful to use a big enough pipe that they don't get stuck. It wouldn't be my preferred option because there's only one way, there's only two ways in, and some predators seem to sit and ambush, you know, they know they went in and they just wait until they come out. So something with lots of different ways in and out that mimics that natural dense vegetation would be good. It's probably a good time to mention the rehabitat pods because they are designed for this purpose. I believe they're designed to break down, right? So they're for use when, let's say, a bushfire goes through and clears out a lot of the understory. You can put these pods in and it provides temporary shelter so that animals can be protected from predators, but they break down over time, so there's nothing left in the environment.